Namaste. Oh, I am so happy to be with you for another one of our wonderful interviews that we're going to have today. And I already know it's going to be wonderful. I'm just telling you right off the bat. I know it. So I want to introduce you to our guest today. His name is Dr. Terry Zachary, and he is the author of Great Hands, Great Life. And he's also an inventor of a product called Handmaster Plus. And he has been a sports chiropractor. And in that capacity, he broke the code on faulty hand exercise that he witnessed in pro golfers. And so he took these lessons to the wider worlds of sports, music, workplaces, gamers, hobbyists, and smartphones. And that was really what intrigued me about when I met him and why I wanted to have him on the show. So first off, I want to welcome you, Dr. Terry, to Live, Love, Engage.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking to you.
Yeah, well, I'm very curious. We met during a, publicity summit a couple of months ago, and hands are something that are very important to me because I've been a musician, I'm a writer, and I also, in my youth, one of my first jobs was working at McDonald's, and so I was, you know, cooking fries and doing all this type of work, but especially even doing I've always been like a typer and working in different jobs, and at one point I developed carpal tunnel syndrome in my wrists, and so I had to have surgery done on it. Because for those of you who may not know what that is, it's a condition, and you could probably explain even better. But it basically, my hand would go numb, and sometimes it was so bad that it was actually painful, and that was the part that forced me to get surgery. When it's just numbness, you can kind of live with it, but when it starts hurting, that's no fun. So I was intrigued to know about, what you were up to in the world, and how you were helping people, um, that you noticed the hand exercises and things, or how people were using their hands wasn't helpful, shall we say. So I would love for you to explain to our audience a little bit about, what got you really interested, because as a you're a chiropractor. Normally, people don't necessarily think about hands with chiropractic. They think more about the back and the spine and whatnot. So, what got you interested in really being focused in as now a hand expert?
Well, Gloria, first of all, that's about as good of an intro as possible into what I do, because when I first started it, and again, I was specifically, I had about half my practice was sports chiropractic, and half my practice was family practice. And what had happened was, we had seen so many, and I'm in the Vancouver area, was where my practice was. So a lot of what we did was focused on hockey players, and I have a background in golf. I played in college, so a lot of professional hockey players, a lot of professional golfers, as the Canadian tour would come through town, but also, of course, high level and everyday weekend athletes as well. And because of my background and growing up in sports, I always was told, take this thing and squeeze it. Could be spring loaded, it could be a coiled unit, might just be a tennis ball or a racquetball. And as I really started studying the body, which is my passion, it's one of my base passions in my life, is really studying the wonder of the body, and how did this body, how are we designed by our maker, however designed this tricky pattern, and it's fascinating. So as I started to study it more, I realized, wait a minute, I saw all these injuries, and this is where specifically in sports, when we started out, Gloria, we looked at, why are these athletes having so many finger and thumb problems, and carpal tunnel problems, by the way, that you already mentioned, and a lot of elbow problems. And as we got into looking at them, we would do a history and ask them what type of exercise they did. If it was a repetitive grip situation, like a golf or a tennis or a hockey, et cetera, a lot of times they would either be doing nothing, or they would be taking something and squeezing it, just like traditionally most of your viewers and myself, when I was early in my path, thought was the right way to do it. But as I started studying, I said, why do we do things this way? I could clearly see that the muscles that close the hand are getting overpowering on the muscles that open the hand. And we're seeing the mechanics of the fingers and thumb and carpal tunnel and wrist and elbow all change because of that. So that was how it all started. I got very interested in it and I saw great results. I was doing 4 or 5 exercises with the hand, which you can imagine these athletes have other areas to be exercised. And the last thing they want to be doing is 4 or 5 exercises. But we started with that, had great results because we were simply following the pattern of the body and starting to learn what the body, how the body moves, and just working with that. It wasn't Terry Zachary saying, well, I think you should do, I think you should put these muscles. It's like, wow, the body's designed like this. Why don't we follow those instructions? And I simply exercised these patients' hand muscles through a full range of motion. Now, I don't want to go on and on about it, but the thing that keeps people away from this, I believe, why somebody didn't come up with this process earlier, is that the hand muscles are very tricky. And if you follow the paths of the hand muscles, all the origins and insertions, if you talk to a hand surgeon, for example, what they would just talk in circles. It's so intricate. And I think it scares people away. So I would approach it that you have 9 muscles that close your hand that are generally located on the front of your fingers and thumbs and hands and wrists and carpal tunnels and elbow. And then you have 9 muscles that open the hand, which are on the back of all of those same structures. So it made sense to me to exercise them all in balance. And once we did, the results were just clear as day. And that's what got me interested in it. I realized this is being done wrong. I learned wrong before I was educated. And then because I work with athletes and I'd always been so interested in sports, I saw it clear as day. And that's what got me interested.
Wow. Now, and you're right, because now that I think back to it, I remember, I think when I was probably first going to a doctor, they would recommend that you get like one of these little kind of squishy balls and
Yeah.
just, squeeze it periodically. And that was supposed to help. So could you just give an example of like maybe one exercise that you would do instead of doing that? Or maybe or are you still do you still recommend that they do that, but it's maybe you do some other things in addition to?
Yep, excellent question. And so the viewers, and this is probably a new concept to most that are listening. What I would just to give it some framework, it's very similar to posture. Your hand muscles actually work very similar to posture. So if I saw somebody if anybody saw somebody with poor posture, the last thing that we would tell them to do is slouch more. Okay, does that
That's
make
good.
sense? And that's
Right. Yeah.
really the concept to go with. So if you were working your example, you're working in McDonald's, you're using your hands, you're gripping, you're also a musician, you're also writing, everything is in a flexion situation. So just like our posture, we do things in front of us all day. If we don't do something to offset that imbalance, we're going to have problems with our spine and our ribs and our breathing and our organs, etc. And it's the same thing that we want to do. We want to strengthen the muscles that open and spread. Okay. So yeah, there's so many ways to look at this. And we designed the Handmaster Plus so you could do literally, instead of 4 or 5 exercises, you close against a ball, you open and spread against the cord. And we want to do it as one continuous exercise. But for your readers or for your, excuse me, your viewers that might not have a Handmaster Plus sitting right there beside them, we used to use an elastic band for this. So something that would come off your vegetables, for example, and you just even taking that and wrap it around the back of your fingers and opening and spreading. Now, the problem you'll eventually deal with, and myself being really picky about how the body's trained, is that once the hand gets open a certain amount, that elastic band's going to slip off. So we don't really train in full range of motion, but it beats the heck out of what we were doing, which is nothing. So even just taking the hand with an elastic band, opening and spreading as wide as you can, or once the elastic band's off, just really taking your hand and opening and holding it, open it wide, use those muscles and close, open wide and use those muscles to close. The idea is we have to add tone to the hand opening and spreading muscles.
And I gotta tell you, I'm just doing it while I'm hearing you talk about it.
Absolutely.
I'm like doing it, on my lap right now. And it's like, it feels good. I mean, it feels
Absolutely.
good to stretch it, to stretch it out and to have, the fingers extended. And I think that's something I'm going to be, probably doing a little bit more often because I spend a lot of time typing on the keyboard and so it does get tiring. So I think that's a good,
Gloria, I think that's also a really important point. It's a hard thing to really for some people to grasp, but the body knows.
Mm.
So you take your hand through a full range of motion, which is a natural range of motion to you. Now, to your mind, you might think, well, I'm still gripping things. I got to grip, grip, grip. But your body knows you, if you make that little change in your life and just take your hand through a full natural range of motion, that's the body's motion. And it will give an intuitive signal to some extent that that feels really good.
Yeah.
And there'll be some degree of endorphin. There's some degree of a change. You'll be able to feel that. And that's because we've simply taken the body through a natural range of motion that it is designed to go through. And that's how we keep the body healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is natural because in the morning, I mean, I find I'm always stretching in bed before I get out because, it's like, you've been sleeping in maybe one position all night. And it's like, and the body's like, okay, I need to open up and stretch a little bit before I can start the day. So why not with the hands as well? Um, that is so cool. So tell me a little bit about as you were maybe coming up with this and trying to maybe even come up with a product, because you mentioned you invented something to help people with. What's been what was like maybe the one or two of the maybe challenges that you faced when you were going through that process?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is having that knowledge that is one of the parts of the story I've left out is that there was a point where I was really moved. I developed my golf game to a point. I was very competitive in college. I was in practice full time, and I actually decided I was competing locally on the side and doing very well. I actually took some time off and traveled on mini tours, and with the dream of making the PGA Tour. I never did, by the way,
Mhm.
but again, great things happened instead.
That's right.
So the first thing I would say is the challenge was I saw all these professional golfers that would come to me once they knew my background, and they would ask me, I'm having this little problem with my elbow or my wrist, a lot of wrist problems or carpal tunnel problems. And so they would pick my brain about it. And then I would still have those 4 or 5 exercises that I had in practice. And everybody's traveling. I didn't want to take a lot of time from my own practice of golf. It was hard to take, an hour and show them these exercises. But the main concern was they weren't going to probably remember the exercises, and they likely weren't going to do them. So I had this dilemma that I knew all these players were going through. And I had this need to solve it. Like, how do I get these people to actually do it? Because I know if I give them 4 or 5 exercises, they're likely not going to follow through. And especially once they're out of pain, they probably won't follow through and train properly.
Mm.
So it's one of those situations where I'm guessing you've run into a lot. One night I'm laying down going, how can I solve this problem? And 3 in the morning, eureka, I put a problem out there, not even asking for an answer, really. And all of a sudden, hey, 3 in the morning, I'm on tour somewhere in the Dakotas, I believe. And I thought if there was an elastic, we could put right through that ball. We don't lose the motion of closing, and we gain the motion of opening with proper resistances, because all the resistance should come from the middle.
Mm.
And got up and just started making some drawings. And then, I think I will add one more thing without going on about this, is that before that day, one of the people that I was traveling with had a really bad tennis elbow
Mm.
problem. And he had 2 children at home. He'd given up kind of the safety of his career, and he couldn't even lift a cup of coffee. So in mini tours, you have to play and do well to make any money.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, I've just really got to help this guy particularly. It's getting to the point where I have to do something about this. And that's when it came to me, and I started drawing things up, made a rough prototype, and then got it to him in a short time, and solved his problem. And I said, this is something really important. We can help people easily with proper mechanics.
Mm. Yeah. I I I love when you're able to come up with a solution when you do have when you've got faced with a problem and that you can finally come up with the idea for it. And that's something that, a lot of entrepreneurs that when they go into business, either they have that idea or maybe they just know they want to do something to help, but they're not quite sure what it is. So it's fortunate that you were able to come up with that. Um, what what gets you excited about the work that you're doing?
Exactly what you just said. Gloria, I love helping people. I love the two things that I believe move us and is our main payment for anything is using our talents. I'm very passionate about sports and mechanics and how do we do things the proper way. And following that, I just got interested in the body and wow, how does the body work to, what do you have to do with the body to make it position itself to perform its best? And then using that curiosity, I really became educated in my pursuits. And then at the same time, now I can give back in a way that helps many people. And we started with golf, Gloria. So that you saw these problems in golf, and the next thing we're going into, as I'm done with my PGA Tour career, and I know that's not going to happen. We saw the same things in all grip sports, in all music, in the workplace, and with gamers. And that was in the late 90s. And since then, it's just taken me everywhere to meet a bunch of different people, even elite. I'm a music fan. I'm not a musician. I'm a wannabe guitar player, not very good yet. But we've met we've worked with Hall of Fame bands now, Country Music Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's thrilling. And when you speak with these people, they're very uneducated about this, as is most people about grip and hand exercise. So we can help them perform better. We can help anybody, young people that are getting into whatever they're doing with their grip or their hands. We can make them perform better from day one. And then obviously we can prevent injuries in the future. And if somebody is going through an injury or has an old injury, we can help them through that. And it's in a way where I don't have to be there. I can explain this. It's an easy exercise. And I know that people are doing it properly because you can't really mess up the exercise. Yeah. So yeah, it's a long exercise, but the serving people with something that is just my passion has just been like, I don't know, it's just like a yellow brick road for me type of thing.
Well, I'm so glad you did. And as you were talking, I'm just thinking about how we take our hands for granted. It's, we there's all types of different, videos and exercise programs and they talk about exercising, your whole body and, or working on your hips or working on your stomach, and what have you. But we don't really think about hands, and we use these every day. We brush our hair, we brush our teeth, we eat. And then for people who are actively using their hands in some sort of work, there's all kinds of, as you mentioned, just a few places with, gamers and things like that. But I'm thinking even people on like an assembly line, people who are doing that type of work. My dad used to work for a car company, so there's people all over the world who are using their hands in some capacity. And it's so odd now that I think about it, that it's like, why aren't we paying more attention to using our hands properly so that they will last us? And I'm also thinking about my mom who had arthritis and her hands were so painful. I used to have to, help her massage them and things like that. I mean, I know there's other reasons why people get arthritis, but perhaps if she'd been exercising her hands all along, maybe it would have made it a little bit easier. She might have still had it, but maybe the pain wouldn't have been as excruciating. I don't know. What do you think?
No, your point there is well taken, because it's even getting into my history. I had no intention of coming out of practice and running around the world in all these different markets and talking about hands. I had no intention of it until you get into it a little bit. And even, you and I speak to it for one time, and you get to see the diversity of what we're dealing with. And the other thing now, you bring in your mom's arthritis and a lot of the health of the hands. And mostly we're talking about the mechanics. You want your hand muscles strong so that the muscles that open and close are balanced and that your grip is working properly. But we haven't spoken even about blood flow and lymph drainage. And it's something that's a really big deal. There's lots of studies even showing that hand strength is directly correlated with life longevity. There's many studies about that. It's probably too long to speak about here, but keeping your hands active, even in your mom's situation, what happens is when we're exercising, let's say any area of the body through a full range of motion, now the body knows intuitively, okay, Gloria's mom's using her hands now. We better get more blood flow, which is all your oxygen and your nutrients out to the sites of the hands. And especially if it's full range of motion now, we've had studies done in our product where the thermography shows twice as much blood flow to the extremity when you're doing full range of motion as when you did just hand closing. So if we do full range of motion for the hands, you get maximum blood flow, which means all your nutrients and oxygen out there, and you'll stimulate maximum lymph and venous drainage, which gets all the waste products and toxins and stuff out of that area, which is definitely how you keep your body healthy. And most people, again, are using a small range of motion of their joints. Well, if I'm putting pressure on a small range of motion of my joint for years and years and years, like a knitter is an example, small range of motion for years and years, and pretty soon there's wear and tear in those joints. That's just, it's not that something's wrong with the body, it's that the body can't react to the misunderstanding of how we're treating it and training it. So absolutely, people use their hands, should be exercising through a full range of motion so that you perform well and you prevent injury and you keep those joints and all the tissues healthy. And it's a lot to say just by closing and open your hand with resistance, but so much good comes out of it. It's very complete.
Yeah, I can see that, and I appreciate you sharing that information. And it's funny. I'm also thinking that, I know you've been focused on the hand for all these years, but I wonder, maybe should be talking about the feet too, because I have a feeling it's the same principle, even though we don't necessarily use our feet the way we necessarily use our hands, but we do use it for walking every day.
Oh, it's very, actually, it's very similar. And we don't want to give anything away about what our company's doing, but we certainly have a concept in mind. It takes a while to test it and make sure it works properly. But just even to the viewers to be interested about that is that the hands are the feet are a little bit different because they're weight bearing.
Yeah.
But they're also extremely passive relative to how they're designed, because we've got these rubber shoes that do all the gripping. And normally if we're walking out in the dirt or the sand or, bare feet, our feet would be doing some degree of gripping as we walk. And so this passiveness that we've designed ourselves into does cause problems, and we'd certainly like to help that in the future, but we're not there yet with something that works.
Cool. All right, but something to watch out for, so that's good.
Yes, absolutely.
So cool. All right, I'm glad I brought it up. So kind of teasing it out there for people to stay tuned. What is a commonly held belief, maybe about health in general or about the hands in particular that you passionately disagree with?
Oh, what a great question. I think that that healing comes from outside. I passionately disagree with that, and that we haven't been supplied by nature with what it takes to stay healthy. And the reason I say that is that our body knows how to heal. We just talked about I don't want to gang up on your mom here today, but even in that situation, yeah, well, the concept of learning about what people have went through and their experiences, we go through our problems, and that's okay as long as we learn from them. And in that situation, your body knows how to heal. If we eat properly and we have nutrients and we breathe properly and we have oxygen, and we're trying to keep, let's say, for example, specifically the hands and the wrists and the carpal tunnels and the elbows healthy. Well, if we exercise that properly, the body intuitively knows now we're using that area. Let's bring oxygen, nutrients, and let's make that happen. Let's get all the end products away, and that's how we keep it healthy. But we have to know we have control of it based on understanding the design of the body. And once we understand the design of the body, it knows what it's doing. There's a saying that one of the people I follow in healthcare for a long time says that the body needs no help, just no interference. And so, meaning that let's learn what the body's telling us about how it wants to be taken care of, and then let's not interfere by putting crappy food into us or something, or smoking and getting bad, we're not getting great oxygen to keep healthy with, etc. Or let's not repetitively grip all the time and not realize we're creating an imbalance, because that's not the hands breaking down, that's our misunderstanding of how the hands work that's being applied improperly. So we want to look at how the body's designed and then not interfere. Help it.
Very good. What are you curious about right now?
What am I curious about? I'm curious about almost everything. Um, I'm curious about, but that's an interesting question because what I'm really curious about is, I'm doing work with the hands, and once I remove this misunderstanding of just the hands, well, now how is the world going to change? They can use, and again, this is not a sell job, but if you're using, when we put people in our product, their life changes when they've had hand problems or they've had performance problems or something like this, and next thing you know, they just do these things. The hand muscles get in balance, the blood flow and lymph drainage gets reestablished, and boom, look at it, their life changes, and now maybe something that they're pursuing, they pursue it easier. Maybe they do better. Maybe they make a difference in this world, and maybe they become a professional golfer, an entertainer, or make a difference in music. I think what I'm curious about, but I hadn't really thought about this, but I'm curious about what if we understood our lives a little. What if we understood our lives better? What if we didn't have all these, kind of negative concepts of ourselves that are limiting what our lives could do? Like that's what I'm doing is improving hands and on all the related areas because the hands are tricky. And all of a sudden we could change that. Well, what if we all, realized our path? I have a path that brought me to help this area of the world. Well, what if somebody could help, people with negative thoughts? My wife is a counselor actually, and so to come to my understanding of our life, where I'm saying we're all these miraculous entities, and we just got to follow our path, and we're going to be of service to the world. We'll be provided for, et cetera, et cetera. Um, you know, to have some child saying, I'm not good enough, or I'm a loser, or I'm not pretty, or all this stuff, it just is such a misunderstanding to me. So, what if we could all see that we're here for our special path and our special purpose, and they went out in the world and not just helped the hands or whatever their purpose is, and that all added up into some kind of totality? Well, what would that be like? That's what I'm curious about. What if we really did start to learn this miraculousness of ourselves and this life and all that stuff? Where could we go from there?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that more and more of us will continue to do that. I do talk with a lot of different people, I think, who are in the position of helping others do that. And that's part of what I do in my business as well. And I I think we have such potential that we've barely tapped into.
Absolutely.
And it could be just wonderful, the things that we could create if we get out of our own way. And I think
That's
that's kind of the main thing. A lot of times it's we just are in our own way.
It's exactly true. And you just back to that saying about, the body needs no help or life needs no help. It just needs no interference. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I have listened to your podcast, and you do a great job with that. And I think we need to all come to the point, even for our own like happiness and purpose and
Yeah.
stuff, we come selfishly to come to this, and our life gets better. But then, once we start helping others, that's peace, and that's everything's working properly when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, is there anything else that I should have asked you about, or any other last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience today?
We covered stuff, Gloria. It's interesting that it's probably, far deeper, and I'm very exciting to me as well. I think the one thing like to leave people with too is like, if somebody is if anybody in your audience is more into like the performance side of, if they're an athlete or a musician like yourself, we do with the product, we've talked about basically our main exercise where you put the product on, you basically close against the ball, you open and spread against the cord, you get all 18 muscles in balance. So that's really difficult to misunderstand. If you can't remember to close your hands and open your hands, you got bigger problems than hand problems. But
Yeah.
all joking aside, we do have an exercise for people that are more performance based. We have several exercises, but those main two, is somebody that's working on strengthening their grip, strengthening and balance, or their hand speed or their range of motion. There's an exercise called the figure eight exercise with Handmaster Plus. And it, to me, is what changed our performance when we're helping people perform, for athletes or musicians, et cetera, gamers. You talked about gamers, people in the workplace, like dental hygienists, and come to mind, but lots of assembly line, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody that uses their hands. The figure 8 exercise, if they look it up, strengthens the 9 muscles that close and the 9 muscles that open, but it also strengthens the 9 muscles of the wrist and forearm that position your hand. So that's a full grip exercises through full range of motion. And we've seen amazing stuff happen in people's performance with that. So I'd like to add that exercise so we don't forget about it. The main hand, open hand, closed exercise is for most people, but performance people, the figure 8 exercise is we brought out in the last couple of years. It's just fantastic.
Awesome. Well, if someone listening or watching on YouTube today would like to get more information about that, learn how they can actually do that exercise in particular, where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, they can go to handmasterplus.com. That'll show people where they can get it. We're in a lot of the pharmacies now in the States, or they can get it online. We do sell internationally as well. So they can find it there, and the exercises are there. If anybody has questions as well, that's what I'm here for, to educate people. I love doing it. There's our email is info@doczac.com. It's doczac.com. And they can feel free to ask me questions about anything we've talked about today. And I can definitely steer them the right way. We spent a lot of time on this subject in the past 15 years, so I don't think they'll get much deeper advice than from me.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, because this has been enlightening for me, and I really appreciate it. And I think you're doing wonderful, good work in the world, and helping us to be able to keep these hands working well. And because we're going to have these hands hopefully the rest of our lives, and we need to be able to use them. So appreciate so much you being with us and sharing your advice with everyone.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoy what you're doing, and keep it up, because this is what we're supposed to do, is help people and use our expertise and help people, and you're doing really wonderfully, and I enjoyed being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I do want to also thank all of you for watching and for listening on your favorite podcast platform. And I encourage you to share this episode with a friend if you got some value out of it, and make sure you're subscribed on wherever you listen to this podcast. And yep, I think that's going to do it for this edition today. So until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.